Hi guys and welcome back. Today is going to be dedicated to sketching and the process that I go through when I'm creating a watercolor piece or a digital piece for that matter, but this is the thing that I definitely prefer doing when I'm doing anything traditional now because this allows me to get complete control over the composition and any details. I can get it as cleanly defined as I want, and today I'm going to go ahead and show you that. I will be finishing this one up probably in watercolors, I think, next week. And today we're just going to work on planning it out, and I'm going to talk about my sketching process as well as the things that I think about, how I find reference, as well as things that I think about when I'm working on the composition. So this is just going to be kind of all-inclusive for when I am working on a new piece, all the things that I'm putting in at that beginning development stage. So to begin this piece, I was watching Crimson Peak and I loved it. It was really visually stimulating and very exciting for me. I loved the look of it and there was just so much inspiration in it for me. And that is pretty much what sparked this piece. I really loved the period piece dresses that she was wearing. They were just really ornate and gorgeous, and that's something that I used to really enjoy drawing, and I've really gone away from that, but I would like to do more of that. I certainly enjoy looking into really ornate fashions and finding a way to show the story that I want to tell through those. But that was the initial spark of when I started sketching this. So I looked up a lot of references of different dresses as well as stills from the movie itself. And in the description, I'll actually have a link to my Pinterest, and that's where I collect a lot of my resources for things like this, where I'm looking for inspiration or ways to draw different types of things. There's just a lot of stuff down there, but you can find a lot of stuff that really influence the styles for the things that I put in this piece. And one thing that I'm really trying to get back to, well, to focus on, I don't think I was ever good at this, but what I'm focusing on is starting off my sketches much looser and form-based, so shape-based, not getting into lines or details. I notice that I definitely go in where I start getting a little bit too in the details or into more specific shapes before I'm ready, and I know that it's holding back the entire design of the piece, and it's really stifling me, and it's forcing me to create shapes that are just not very dynamic. So I'm trying to get better at working looser and quicker and getting the forms down and then starting to define the actual definition that happens within it. And I think that I was better at this one than I normally did. It was helpful that I was working off of some really good references that had great shape language. So being able to look at that and then pushing it even more in the sketch and just really focusing on larger shapes. One thing that really helps with that when you're working digitally is that I make sure that my zoom is not too far zoomed in. This was about 100%, that is, when I was first sketching it out. And this keeps me from getting too close into it and getting all nitty-gritty too fast, because if I do have it zoomed in, it's just inevitable that I'm going to start focusing on the details and more fine shape definition. And if I'm zoomed out, it really helps me to get broad shapes, broad strokes, and it smooths them out too. That is the biggest thing, is that I'm really trying to get shapes that flow from one to another, and they have this gracefulness to them as well as repetition of certain types of shapes. That is one thing that I love, finding ways to do it and include in it, but oftentimes it gets pushed back to just the details, and I really want that continuation of shape language to be throughout the sketch, through the structure of it, not just in the little defining details. So like, there are several details in her dress that I really enjoyed putting similar flicks in them, I guess you could say. The shape that they created, I enjoyed finding ways to do that, but I also really wanted to get the structure to mimic certain shapes as well, and I'm trying to get better at that. That is a focus of mine. And a bit about the hand, I was struggling getting it right. I was looking at reference online and it just wasn't really matching the way that I wanted it to look or the perspective on that. And this is, again, just, I'm a huge proponent for taking your own reference. You can get it exactly right. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to take my own. So I stood up and I just used my webcam. I recommend taking videos of it because then you can take a lot of different poses very quickly and find the right one. But I just took my webcam and I took a shape that was similar to the candlestick she would be holding. And I tried out several things. And the interesting thing is that her hand was much more turned in towards her, or my hand, I should say, as I was posing. So it was a lot more of an overlapped shape that I was initially looking up reference for and drawing, and it became a lot more realistic as well as it gave a lot more depth to it. So that was a detail that I thought I was getting right, but because I was using two disjointed references, it wasn't quite right. So once I put my hand in that position, I realized that her whole arm would be going more towards the background and her hand would be curling in, and that was the most natural and the most pleasant looking hand that I could do. So I was really happy with the way that it did turn out, and it is always much faster and more painless to take your own reference when you can. Of course, not every time you're going to be able to, but it definitely helps. For her head as well, I did end up looking quite a bit for references for this very slightly turned away 3/4. Or I don't think 3/4 is quite the right word. It's a profile, but it's turned slightly away from the viewer, if that makes sense. So you're seeing a little bit more of her ear and a little bit more of like the back of her jaw. So I did spend some time trying to find some better references to find that. I wanted her jaw to be a lot more prominent than mine is, and there's just several details that I just wanted to be able to push it a little bit more, and I knew that I'd be able to find a better reference of that particular thing online, and eventually I did find it. I don't know if it actually was better than taking my own, but ultimately I did find one that had the right kind of turn of her head that I wanted, and that helped quite a bit. There is always things like that when I'm trying to draw something in a slightly different perspective like that. There's things that I know it's not right, but I can't quite know how to fix it because I haven't drawn that position. So when I find that perfect reference and I can see exactly where, oh, that line is actually supposed to be overlapping that, or this one defining line makes it all look like it's in the right perspective, that is just such a victorious moment for me. I love that. It's just this little puzzle piece that I finally solved, and once I put it in there, I can instantly see my art that I'm working on improve so much, and I love finding details like that. So her hand and her face, those are two things like that where once I fit those little puzzle pieces in, it really improved it for me. And then when I was working on the background, I really wanted something that I could put a little bit more detail in, as well as finding ways to put a little bit more of like a wear and tear on it. In the movie, which I'm not trying to make this like a representative of or fan art or anything of that, but it was really inspiring. But in the movie, this house is just absolutely decrepit. It's completely falling apart. But I didn't necessarily want to push it that far, but I did want to find ways that I could put scratches and tears in the walls. And I ended up deciding on having her in front of this window, and I spent a long time looking at all these Art Deco windows. And speaking of, I did do the background a lot more Art Deco inspired, but her dress is more Edwardian era style, so they are a little bit mismatched. Edwardian period was, I believe, 1900 to like 1910 or 1915, I believe, so the beginning of the 1900s. And then Art Deco is like 1920s, I believe, so it's a little bit mismatched, but I actually am totally okay with that. I'm not a stickler for making sure that things stick to the right era, but I did look at Art Deco windows, and I loved how organic they were. They just had these really swooping, curving shapes for this object that normally is very rigid and square and rectangular. So I was really excited about that. So I think that this window is one thing that once I actually get to painting it, it's going to really make it pop as far as what it actually is, because right now it looks like it could be like I'm trying to draw branches, or it's not entirely clear what it is. But I think once I paint it and it becomes window, it'll appear that way, and it'll make it really stick together the way that it needs to look. And doing that wallpaper is actually really pleasant in Photoshop, but you can do that kind of a thing easily when you're doing traditional sketches. You can just use either a light box or tracing paper and have the section of your pattern drawn out, and then just switch it over so it locks in each section. And I love doing stuff like that where it just perfectly fits together. So I'm actually really excited to paint that. It's going to be fun to do this really ornate pattern, that is. I also think that I'd like to do a soft little pattern on her dress as well, but I haven't quite figured out what that is, and I know that I want to do it in watercolors so it can be more subtle. And that is it for today's sketch. I'll be finishing it up next week, like I mentioned, and a little bit of announcements. I will be at Salt Lake Comic Con this weekend, so please come say hi to me. I love meeting you guys. It's always such a pleasure to say hello to you. And don't be shy. I know that I was really shy as a kid, so don't be, because I understand where you're at. But anyways, I would love to meet you. Do mention that you watch this Wednesday video, and I'll have a little mini print for you guys for free just for coming and saying hi. And yeah, I think that is about it. I do have a link in the description and my end card that'll take you to my art shop. And that is a great way to help support me in these videos. It really does mean a huge amount to me, so I really do appreciate that. And I do post every Wednesdays and Saturdays, so I will see you guys at my next one.